Has there ever been a time in American history that's very well documented, vividly clear, and profoundly memorable when white women have put their lives on the line for women of color? Has there ever been a moment in time in American history when women of color have been able to collectively count on white women to raise their voice, to speak up for them, to stand in the gap for them, to go to bat for them, to give up their time, their money, their resources, their energy, and to sacrifice their livelihood for the sake of women of color? Can you think of a time when collectively, in large numbers, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of white women have rallied together to stand up and fight for women of color, for their rights, for their dignity, for their truth, for their values, for their pure existence and presence in the world? Can you think of a time in American history when that has happened? That's a question that I ask often. And when I ask that question, I often get the same answer. And it's usually one of two answers: silence, no answer at all, or the answer is no. And I still ask that question. And I'm still looking for an answer. Is there a time that you can think of in American history when that has happened? And to date, the answer is no. And so why hasn't that moment occurred in American history? Why haven't white women put their lives on the line for women of color? Why haven't white women sacrificed their time, their money, their energy, and their resources for women of color? Do you have an answer for that? I have several answers for that. And part of the answers that I have and that I provide, I offer to women who participate in a 2-day workshop called SHETalks, WETalk, Race Talks for Women. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. That time that I am asking about, that time that we can't seem to find in history, that time that appears to clearly not exist in the history of the women's movement and the women's struggle. There's a reason behind that. But that time is now. That time is now for white women to collectively stand up, speak out, and put their lives, their money, their resources, their time, their energy on the line for women of color. And so part of the reason that I believe that this has not happened is a couple of things. Number one, they don't have to. Number two, collectively, white women don't necessarily care about the pain and plight of women of color. That's clearly obvious, because if they did, they would have already stood up collectively, spoke up collectively, put their time, their lives, their money, their resources on the line for women of color. So the two main reasons that this doesn't happen is because white women don't have to, and collectively as a group, they don't care about women of color. Now, sure, you're going to find that there are groups of women who do, there are individual women who do, but collectively as a whole, I'm not buying it. I don't believe it. And so that time is now. That time is now for white women to stand up, to use their voice, to use their body, to use their lives, their time, their money, their resources, to intervene on behalf of what is happening to black and brown women in this country today. And so that's one of the things that I talk about at SHETalks, WETalk, Race Talks for Women, is how white women can stand up and begin to use their voice, their time, their money, their energy, their resources to stand in the gap for women of color, to stand along with women of color, and to take seriously the pain and plight of women of color in this country. I can cite lots of things that are happening to women of color in this country, but if you're tuned in socially, you should already be aware of what's happening. And we can look at the recent Women's March on Washington that happened earlier this year in 2017. And even with a large, profound event like that, there still was the struggle. And it seemed like it was difficult to center the voices of women of color, to put them in the front, to make their needs a priority. From the top down, from the national march to marches in local communities, white women just couldn't seem to step aside and allow the needs, wants, and desires of women of color to be at the center. Why is that? Why does that happen? Part of the answer is that it goes back to what I said earlier about they don't have to. And they don't care. Because that's the way society has set it up for white women. To be on this pedestal, to be first, to be in the front, to be heard, to be supported in every way possible. And for century after century, this is the norm. And so here we are in 2017, still trying to put voices of color in the front, still trying to center voices of color, still trying to amplify the pain, the plight, and the needs of women of color. And so I go back to my two answers. White women don't have to, and they don't care, collectively as a whole. So it's time to do something about that. And if you're ready to amplify the voices of women of color, to put them at the center, to understand what their pain and plight is, and do something about that, to stand alongside of them and be an accomplice to eliminate the racism that they experience, I want to see you at SHETalks, WETalk, Race Talks for Women. There's a link below. You can register now, you can get signed up, and you can learn how to put those voices first, how to move to the side, step to the back, and finally make history and do what white women should have been doing for centuries. That time is now. Make sure that you get signed up for this workshop.